item of business this morning. I'll first introduce our committee members, Roy Priest and Rick Nelson, and I serve as chair. And we have Jeffrey Merkowitz with us as well, our fellow commissioners. The first order of business is the minutes of our November 20 committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And now we're ready to move on to a discussion of the missing middle. Who is going to be presenting that to us this morning?
So, good morning, commissioners and staff. For the record, I'm Kayreen Brown, Deputy Executive Director, and just very briefly, we have 6 items for discussion today. And this first item will be discussed by Jay Shepard. It's a request for the commission to approve task order to select land use council for the missing middle initiative at Sandy Spring, and for an authorization for the executive director to execute a purchase order to commence the work. So I'll turn it over to Jay Shepard, who is a senior financial analyst in the real estate development group, to lead the discussion. Jay, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, good. Obviously a little comms check there. So yes, good morning. My name is Jay Shepard, and for the record, senior financial analyst on the real estate development group. So this morning, we're asking for the committee to recommend the advancement to the commission, the results of a procurement that we solicited to HOC's legal pool for land use representation on the Sandy Spring Missing Middle Initiative. And this is this item that I think, Patrice, you've got control of this? Or is that Nico?
That's me, Nico.
Okay, good morning, Nico. I think that starts on page 8 of the briefing book. So just as an overview, and if you have any questions, certainly feel free to jump in. But the commission, so this opportunity, this is the 3rd time we've been to the commission. The first 2 were for pre-development related budget approvals. The first was a concept approval, and the second, which was the most recent in March, was for the second phase of the opportunity to see if the commission wanted to keep pursuing this opportunity and to approve a budget request. In that budget, there was authorization to approve a phased-in approach of work associated with getting us through the preliminary plan application. And we knew that we would engage legal counsel to have to do that. We also knew that legal counsel for that total representation would be larger overall. And so, but at that time, we actually achieved and got receipt of approval for up to $100,000 in the budget from the commission for legal work associated with this effort. And so in November, we solicited our legal pool through a competitive process. 4 firms were actually eligible to do this type of work. 3 of them provided responsive bids, and those 3 are provided in the packet, the results of their bids on that page. And 1 firm, Selzer Gervich, actually was the most qualified as well as the most responsive in terms of pricing, just barely beating Schneider Harrison, which also is equally good, would have been a good choice as well, but just being slightly higher. And so a couple things. First, the total amount of their proposal it exceeds the executive director's authorization. And so that's one of the reasons why this is coming before the committee for the commission's representation on approval. But we're also asking for a 10% contingency on this item. So that's why the total request is 280,000. However, we don't have the budget approval yet for that total amount. So it made sense from our perspective to solicit the full effort so that we're not getting a piecemeal in terms of pricing, and we get the best pricing possible if they see that their full effort is engaged. But for the actual contract mechanism, which is the purchase order, we only have approval up to 100,000. And so there's two parts to the request that we're asking for. One is to have the committee recommend that we approve the full amount of 280,000, but then a secondary approval to authorize the executive director to execute purchase orders. That's up to our budget authority of 100,000. And then as this moves forward and we get through this concept phase, we would return back to the commission in 2021 at some point, probably in the May, June timeframe, to request additional budgetary authorization. And that would be for the continuance of the project through final site plan. And that would cover the rest of their engagement. The budget at that time would show 180,000, right, which is the difference between the 280 and the 100,000. And so on the last page, we have the staff recommendation and committee and commission action. I know we will, for the commission, we're going to look at the issues for consideration and make sure that matches obviously the commission action needed. But the two tasks in front of you are the approval for the 280,000, as well as the executive director approval to sign those purchase orders up to 100,000. So I'll stop there.
Question, Jay.
Yes.
If you're requesting the committee to consider increasing the amount for legal fees up to $280,000, is that correct? For land use services, for legal services.
Yes. Yeah. It wouldn't be a formal budget approval, but it's an approval of the authority, the task order. Correct. Thank you.
I was asking because I was wondering why you were limiting the request to allow the executive director to execute purchase orders only up to $100,000. Just because you don't have but $100,000 for budget authority?
Yeah, I have 100,000 current budget authority. Correct.
And that's in the 2020 budget?
Yes, that was in March of 2020.
Okay. All right. The other point, if you could just briefly describe what we were talking about in terms of the missing middle, since most people, for the first time, as we've been doing this now on live stream, probably don't know what we're talking about. So if you could just briefly describe what the missing middle concept is, it would be, I think, helpful for the listeners to understand it.
Oh, of course. And thank you. Sorry, that was kind of an oversight of mine. Yeah, the missing middle is not new, but I think it's relatively new to the county, and it really is a development type process in which you have higher density with a suburban feel. Is kind of the best way I can describe it. You have singles and duplexes that are arranged in such a way that you create additional density. And by additional density, I'm talking 15 to 16 plus units on a single acre versus the traditional 5 to 7. And so it achieves greater density and overall achieves greater affordability because you can spread the land cost out over a larger number of units, and that cost is thereby reduced. and we can pass those savings directly on to the tenants who inhabit those.
Okay, Rick, following up on Commissioner Priest's question, why doesn't this action just ask for the increased budget authorization at the same time, so you don't have to come back on this one issue?
Yeah, I mean, we could have done it that way, absolutely.
And if the committee prefers that, we could amend the request and increase it to the 280.
I mean, it seems to me that we're approving the 280 for the max cost for legal services. So we ought to at the same time approve the budget authorization, and then you don't have to bring it back to us. I mean, there's enough stuff that you got to bring back and forth.
Sure.
And at the same time, authorize the executive director to execute the necessary purchase orders up to that full amount.
Okay, we will amend this request to reflect increasing the budget for land use legal to the full.
And I'd move support.
Is there a second?
I second that.
The amended amount. Am I correct,
Yes,
Roy?
that is correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions of the staff? Hearing none, I'll call for the question for us to recommend up to $280,000 to our colleagues on the full commission. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. The item is approved. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is the bond counsel contracts. Karine and
Karine Brown for the record, and I will review this with the committee.
thank you.
We're requesting the committee's support of our recommendation to the commission to renew the bond counsel contract with Kutak Rock and Ballard Spar for 1 year. And this is the final renewal under the current procurement. And just by way of background, in 2017, the commission approved a new contract with Kutak Rock and Ballard Spar, initially for 3 years with 2 1-year renewals for a maximum term of 5 years. And we're bringing this forward at this time so that if the commission wishes to start a new procurement, we have enough time to do that. This request would commence a new 1-year term in April of 2021 that would run through April of 2022. At that time, or before that term expires, we would start a new procurement. Just by way of background, the details of this request is in your packet, but just with a little bit of background, when this procurement occurred in 2016, 2017, the commission authorized Kutak Rock to serve as bond counsel on all of the commission's parity indentures, both single family and multifamily, and for Ballard Spar to represent the commission on private development transaction that are standalone until they gained enough experience in working with the commission's documents and procedures. As it turned out, there really hasn't been a lot of activity for private developer transactions, mainly because of limited resources around volume cap. And so they've not had the opportunity to do that. That said, they have done, Ballard Spar has worked with the commission in other capacity, but just not as bond counsel. And so they're still part of the bond counsel team. And we are requesting the renewal. Their fees would, if they were to represent the commission on private developer transaction, there's a 3% escalation in their fees. Kutak's fees remain unchanged from the initial bid from 2017. And all other terms remain unchanged. And so if there are questions, I can answer them, but as I said, the details are outlined in your packet, and the representation that they provide to the commission are shown there. So if there are questions, I can take them.
Hey, Reed, I don't recall when we approved this, the stark difference in cost between the two firms. Did we address that then, and were you supposed to go back and see if Ballard Spar could put a finer point on their costs? Because they are significantly higher than KUTAC. And we were trying to give Ballard Spar a chance to expand our pool of people who are experienced in this area. But I mean, there's a serious question about whether it's worth it.
Yeah, well, so Commissioner, yeah, we've often had conversation about the disparity in price. But the other point, and I think, I mean, this happens occasionally, there might be a conflict or something like that. And so we felt we needed to have at least one other firm in the mix. It happens on occasion. It isn't always the case.
We got two now.
Yeah, right. We got two now. And I think Kayreen and team have been working to try and make it generally a more robust group that are closer in price range. And so my guess is that we would actually continue to fine tune it over time. You're right. There's a considerable difference in the pricing.
And my next question, and I'm sorry, Kayreen, when you started out, you mentioned something about the two renewals, and if the commission wanted to go back out. I was looking at something on my computer, so I didn't quite hear all that. I mean, this contract, this is the last renewal authorized under the contract, right?
Yes.
So we have to go back out, don't we?
So yeah, we have to go back out, but not at this time. So this renewal would commence in April of 2021. That would run through 22. So at some point in 2021, I would say in the fall or so, we'll start new procurement in time for 2022.
Okay, I just wasn't clear what you were saying. I agree with that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm supportive.
One of the concerns that I have is with the length of experience these firms have with us, the difficulty we're going to have, I would expect we're going to have in finding firms with equal experience with the breadth of work that we have for them. And I would think it's going to be a challenge.
So obviously Kayreen knows better than I. In the space, you're really only talking about a handful of firms.
That's right.
I mean, there are others, but we've had a long relationship with KUTAC, a long successful relationship. I think that Kayreen has been trying to deepen the bench, and in terms of experience, I mean, there are levels of transaction. There are some that are plain vanilla. There are others that frankly require a great deal more hands-on experience. They may not have had experience with us, but in the field itself, they certainly could have experience that's directly applicable to our challenges or our challenges in partnership with other developers.
I think that it's good that we're doing this now and providing ourselves the time it's going to take to go back out and find
and I would add that that having another firm alongside the main firm that covers our parity indentures, because that's really a very sensitive area. We don't want to switch firms and have somebody covering our parity when we've had 41 years of opinions on our bond issuances, and somebody coming with a different opinion that could disrupt the entire finance program, because that would be problematic. However, somebody coming in, working alongside, understanding our program and how we've made decisions throughout the years, can be helpful. But there are firms, if something were to happen at Kutak Rock and we had to change, could step in. So having two firms can be helpful to the commission. It's always good to see who's out there and go through the interview process and hear from them how, what their approach to representing a parity indenture of 40 years. And the commission can hear from them and make the decisions about whether, having one or two firms, it makes sense for us.
Well, I would think it would be important to consider as we go out the next time to not offer the same terms of time so that we're not faced with replacing both firms at the same time. And so maybe offer a 3-year first with option to renew 2 for one party to be renewed for 2 1-year terms, and the other firm 5 years with the right of 2 a 3-year term and 1-year extensions, so that we're not confronted with having both of the firms needing to be replaced at the same time, so that there's overlap in the future. That doesn't make sense, then you can advise us otherwise. But I think staggering it so that we're not without someone that has extended history or has history with us.
I think that this is a very worthwhile conversation, but I think we are moving ahead to the discussion around what happens at the conclusion of this particular contract as we go out and re-advertise. So we can certainly have a continuing discussion about that with the staff, but I would certainly move to recommend that we support the recommendation of the staff related to extending this contract for 1 year.
Second.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
All
Rick
in
Nelson.
favor? Okay, all in favor of recommending the extension of both of these contracts to our colleagues at full commission, indicate by saying aye.
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 All right.
Okay.
Just a quick correction to the memo. It's on page 13. It says the last renewal was made in January of 2021. So I think that should probably say 2020.
Yes.
2020. Yes, I'll make that correction. Thank you.
All right. Do we need a motion to make that correction, or we have?
I think you can assume that at least my second would have included that correction.
Okay,
And I guess the same would go.
therefore the vote will stand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Making the motion also accepts that.
Thank you. We are agreed then. All right. And now we move to the Metropolitan.
And for this one, Hyun-Suk Choi, Senior Financial Analyst in the Real Estate Development Division, will discuss this item, which requests the selection or the committee's support to the commission to select Minor Feinstein Architect and for the executive director to negotiate a contract with the firm, as well as the request for loans to the 2 entities that own the Metropolitan. Hyun-Suk, please begin your discussion.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, Development Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Hyun-Suk Choi. So Metropolitan was built the area right above the Montgomery County Garage in 1997. The Metropolitan currently providing 92 affordable unit and a 216 market rate unit in downtown Bethesda. The 216 market unit completed some minor renovation in 2013, but the affordable unit has not been updated since 1997. In September 2020, the Commission approved the feasibility fund to engage third-party consultant to investigate and document the existing condition of the building. In October 2020, staff issued the solicitation for the architecture service for the renovation of Metropolitan from the architecture and then accessibility consulting pool established under RFQ 2080. Staff received the 5 proposals from the qualified firms, Holt, Coughlin, March, Kishimoto Golden Delaire, KTG Wide Architecture and the Planning, and the Minor Feinstein Architect, and then Zevo Architectures and the Design on November 18, 2020. The score team completed its review and then response on December 1st, and the second to based on the 5 criteria. First, the experience, pricing, qualification, and the schedule, and the minority female disabled owned the business. There was 5 respondents to the Metropolitan test score. MFA scored highest average of the evaluated scores on criteria with an average score of 82.3. Based on evaluation of 5 respondents, staff recommend Minor Feinstein Architect as an architect for the renovation Metropolitan. MFA is proven historically successful work for the HOC, including Alexander House and Arcola Tower as a high-rise building. The renovation will be similar to scope to Alexander House and increase the efficiency of the building to reduce the operation cost, the both property and the resident. And staff is proposing achieve a National Green Building Standard NGBS Silver certification. The staff requests the $699,622 for the pre-development phase of the architecture service to be funded with a loan from the OHRF. Service for this phase, including several components to move design development from the concept to the construction document, which is not including construction CA, and to prepare the low-income housing tax credit application for submission to the DHCD. In addition, staff request for the $100K for the to be funded with a loan from the OHRF for interior designer service to cover concept development through construction documentation. I'm happy to answer your question.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, and this would probably apply to contracts like the last one we talked about. In some areas, I assume it's difficult finding MFD firms. So the question I would have is, what do our RFPs say and or our contracts say in terms of minority employment if it's not in fact an MFD firm?
Yeah, so no one has it MFD satisfied, but however, MFA actually they're consultant for structure, which is the manufacturing business, which is SKA, which is the original structure engineer, and also their MEP consultant, who is the CTA, which is that also I think minority business, and then they're already working on Arcola Tower before. So, but the actual architecture firm is not the MDE. I'm sorry, MDF. However, their 2 consultants is that they're already providing documentation, but we cannot providing score because of we are a contract with the architecture firm, not their consultant.
Yes, it is.
I have another question kind of related, and that is the question of section 3.
Yes, in the afternoon.
How are we doing on section 3 in evaluating these various firms?
So when they submit to the response for that the solicitation, so we are providing as an exhibit for section 3 and an HOC work. So they have to be filled at the form they are submitting to us. So for example, Minor Feinstein, they basically saying that it's hard to hire the HOC resident. However, they actually put it in, identify the dollar amount they want to contribute to the project. So they already identified that the cost to their proposal.
So they're satisfying their HOC work requirement by paying into HOCP.
Yes, that is correct.
I just feel that we've got to encourage these firms to do better. Paying in is easy. Recruiting and employing low-income people, providing training for them is what we're hoping to achieve for our residents and the people on our waiting lists. And I think we've just got to be more aggressive and insist that these firms understand that the commissioners are not satisfied with them just paying into, certainly I'm not satisfied with them just paying into a fund rather than making bona fide efforts to, and aggressive efforts, affirmative efforts to be employing lower income people. So I trust my colleagues agree with that. And I just think that we need to be more aggressive at pushing them.
This is actually a topic, commissioners. I appreciate Commissioner Simon. I appreciate that gentle reminder.
Not so gentle, I'm afraid.
No, it wasn't. It was pretty gentle. Karina and I have talked about this one in particular as it relates to certain of the professions and this our insistence and our encouragement that they push it a little bit for a lot further. And so stay tuned, because I think what it's going to warrant is us actually segmenting organizations by group so that we can figure out better solutions that are more appropriate for them, but also help us reach our objectives.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, because I think we have to take into consideration the skill set of those professionals who we are procuring services from. Because some of them are nature like architects and engineers and others that are very high level professional requirements. Sometimes it's very difficult in terms of trying to meet some of those standards, but we should continue to force it to happen. But where we know that it's that their recruitment efforts have been made and they have unable to do things specifically for our job, then we need to take into consideration that accepting a payment in lieu of employment is certainly another course of action that we would certainly recommend. It's not ideal, but certainly to get some extraction of benefits from people who are doing business with the agency is also important to do in any way we can get that. So we will continue to push that. We talk about this almost in every procurement we have. So we will continue to make that a high priority area.
And clearly, I mean, there are draftsmen, there are secretarial support. It's not that they can't fill some positions within their firms. And to me, it may not be the chief architect and it may not be one of the chief designers, but any firm can be hiring people with supporting skills. And I think that we need to be pushing as hard as we can. So
one of the things that's happened in the past, because I'm very familiar with the whole MBA requirement, is the fact that a lot of firms will acquiesce and do what we ask about MBE, and the minute that the job is complete, the person is no longer employed. So the employment lasts through the procurement process, and then after that, there's nothing done more to sustain it. I think we've got to find ways as we do this, that we're not talking just about temporary positions that go with the procurement, but also are part of the commitment of that firm for diversity in their hiring practices.
But at least the resume of that person has been expanded and they are more competitive in the marketplace. And therefore are more likely to be able to find another job that moves them up and lifts them up. And I think it's unconscionable that people would hire with that in mind, but it's still a step up for the person who has the job, both by income and resume development. So I'm gonna really be asking a lot of questions about our progress in this area.
I apologize for actually stepping away to accept the call during part of that discussion, but obviously, since I raised it, I'm very concerned, and I think the conversation that you've just had reflects that. I was interested in, Stacy, and you're saying that we will have further discussions because you and Kayleen are looking at that. I think the whole subject deserves a bit more fuller discussion with, concerning all the aspects of this. There are pros and cons on each issue and each side. And we've danced, I don't mean it facetiously. We've talked about it over the years, but we have, I don't think, made great strides. And I think we need to focus our attention a considerably bit more.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think we are, there are certain areas where we're making incremental but steady progress. There are other areas, and the architects is one of those glaring ones, given the level of development and rehab, et cetera, that we're doing, where we're at zero. And so I do not at all mean to indicate that, oh, more discussion. What I meant was tactically, there's a way that we have to attack this, and just as a note, the procurement team has been actually working on something around this for a little bit of time. So I think we're getting close to ready to release it. So,
but I think we shouldn't fall into the trap of accepting that there's no minority talent out there in those areas. There are minority architects. There are minority folks that a firm like Kutak can hire. I mean, they had a partner who was a minority who I think retired a couple of years ago. Have they replaced her with a minority? I mean, it is possible if they are committed to doing this, and we just have to. And I understand it's a balance, but we just got to push them.
That's right. And I think our own staff is an exemplary reflection of how a commitment to inclusion can be accomplished. And it's something I'm particularly proud of our agency for. I think our staff is second to none. And so it's not that we're doing do as I say. We are asking our service providers and professionals to do as we do. And so I appreciate Stacy, you and Corrine figuring out how we can lean on these folks harder and provide incentives, whether it's a larger contribution, which would make it hurt more for not following through or whatever. But I leave it to the staff to figure out how to do it. But I know it can be done because we have done it. You have done it. And I'm very proud of it.
I have two other questions. One's a small one. Didn't we have a discussion a couple years ago about interest on loans from the OHRF? Do we have a policy of interest free? I thought we had a discussion about charging some interest.
We did. Was Cornelia on?
Yeah, Terry, I'm on.
Yeah, we did have a discussion. We've not brought it as a formal action, but Cornelia and I have spent some time talking about how interest is charged on loans from the OHRF. And I don't think we've even had a full discussion with the executive director yet, and agreed upon procedures going forward. So Stacy, if you'd like us to have the discussion with you first and then put it before the committee, we can do that. I think that would be appropriate.
Well,
Might be,
absolutely.
it might be worthwhile to have a chat about it. I'm not surprised, but
Yeah, okay, just please, let's put that on the calendar for
Yeah.
discussion. Okay. The next question I have is, we keep referring to minor renovations in 2013. I mean, minor is in the eye of the beholder, I think. I don't recall what the amount was that was spent on those renovations. But my real question is this going to, in fact, replace all that stuff that was done then? And are we redoing work 7 years later that could and should have lasted longer than 7 years?
I mean, I think we really ought to look at.
I thought that the,
so we did, I think we did cosmetic work, first of all. I mean,
It was more than cosmetic. It was the rationale, as I remember it, was we have an A property and we want to keep it an A property. Therefore, I think, well, we did appliances and other stuff.
well,
I
so
thought it was more than cosmetic.
I don't think we're trying to replace appliances unless there's an efficiency thing. But Hunsuk, why don't you give us a little more detail?
Sure. So the market time at the time was the replacing cabinet, appliance, the only market unit, and also some common area. And also we replacing the balcony railing. So there is some replacing at the time. But now we actually want to replacing all mechanical system and the water piping because there's a lot of busting domestic hot water, domestic water. And then also we are going to replacing elevators, elevator software, and inside the cap, and also the lobby area. And then currently there is a two lobby space. For example, the property management office, one area, and then the small area, which is really not using it. So it's kind of a dysfunction. So we want to more better way to leasing as of their team, and also easy to get into their mail room. So they're more like a design plus more function. And also we are looking for long-term holders. So we are more make sure that we are benefit to our resident, also to the property, to able to reduce our operation expense.
Okay, so what I think what Commissioner Nelson is cautioning us against is replacing things that we just paid for. And so, and I think he's looking for more than a head nod, but rather an assurance that we're not going to be essentially doing the same thing we just did.
Well, I want, yes, and just to be sure that what we did is taken into consideration as we plan forward. I appreciate that we didn't do some of the infrastructure stuff, and that's all major stuff, but just be careful.
Okay.
I have another concern. The fact that we made improvements to the market rate units, but not the assisted units. My hope is that we are maintaining the same level of quality. And I would assume, from what I know, that if the equipment is the same and we have it in inventory, then replacement, whether it's an assisted unit or a market unit, is going to level out and level down. And I would think that from a management point of view, having the units uniform is going to provide the opportunity to have more flexibility when a vacancy occurs, whether it's an assisted unit, it counts as an assisted unit or a market unit. And so it troubles me that we did part of our units and not the rest of them. And
Well, we couldn't, Commissioner, just as a technical matter on this one. This is the way that we, as an agency, and frankly, the entire industry continues to do it this way, but this is the way that we as an agency did it. There are two separate owners. One is the tax credit entity and the other is the other units. And so, there are certain requirements and I'll say guardrails that require us to do certain things, on a certain schedule. And so, unfortunately, and this was we had a mighty set of animated conversations around precisely your point. We ought to be where we can treating all the units the exact same way with the same treatment. We work hard to do that. This was an instance where because of the ownership structure, we didn't have that. We didn't have that luxury.
well, I hope that as issues are brought to us where this confronts us as a problem, we have a full discussion of this issue. I just feel that it's very important that the neighbors' units are comparable, and I want us to be as careful as we can to go as far as we can. I'm not satisfied with doing it to everybody else's standard. I want to see us do better every time we can. So just know that that's an issue that troubles me.
Yeah, and Commissioner Simon, ordinarily we would not renovate the market units and ignore the affordable units. It was, as Stacy said, for the tax credit ownership at the time, and we were negotiating buyback of the affordable units from the limited partner. And there are technical reasons why we could not at the time renovate the affordable units, because it's not our practice at all to do one and not the other. And there was a full discussion at the time with the commission as to why we went this route, and we continued to maintain, to the best of our ability, the affordable units at the time, and continue to do so throughout the years. And we're ready to do the full renovation of those. In fact,
so this time we'll be bringing the assisted units to the level of the market units with this renovation.
Absolutely.
Remember that partnership is under our control now.
Yes.
We had a protracted and
difficult
negotiation to take hold of those the units that were in the tax credit limited partnership, and it was we learned a lot.
It may have been before my time, and I don't understand the implications of it, but I hope we don't get ourselves in that kind of a position in the future. It just does not sit well with me.
So was this the soonest we were able to start renovating the assisted units?
Yes, we I mean, what is it, a year ago that we finally got the agreement negotiated. And look, I mean, we're talking about in a discussion with the seller. It took a significant period of time, and I mean, and was not without arm twisting and great gnashing of teeth. And the fact of the matter is, this is one of our business partners, had been for decades at that point, and but for but for some tough discussions, they weren't relenting.
Mm-hmm.
So we were finally able to get them.
Yeah. Can I just add a related question? Looking at the pictures on page 20 there, like I see, two different equipment rooms, gyms. Like, is that actual? Or there's not a different gym for assisted units and for market units, is there? Or because I'm just a little confused by, it says existing condition below, and then it says market condition on the right. And so,
Yeah,
So,
Go ahead, Jens.
so basically, I'm gonna show what is that our property
Yeah.
for the left side. So this is the actual pictures of our property: corridor, bathroom, kitchen, which is a market unit, and then there is our gym. But when I compare to the right side, which is the downtown Bethesda, which is the current design, current finish, and also they have a more amenity. Rooftop social area, fitness, and the dog wash station. And then, that is a location. So this is kind of the current design. So I wanted to compare to our property to that the market.
To the competition.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not that there's two different fitness centers in the building, and
Right.
the market rate units get access to a nice one, and the
No.
Correct.
yeah. Okay.
Right.
This is the
Yeah,
the
those are pictures from comps that have been more
Yes.
recently built.
That's what I suspected, but I wanted to
Thank you.
confirm.
We'll
Yes.
just clarify it. We'll clarify it that it's illustrative, but yeah, we can make that note.
Thank you.
And I ask one last question, I hope last. What are we doing, or what will we do to try to negotiate with the county in terms of cash flow to help bear some of the burden on the cost of renovations?
So again, I guess this is the transaction of animated and difficult conversations. And so, I think we've had some initial conversations about this. We continue to push on it.
Unsuccessfully, I guess.
Listen, I would send you some apple cider. If we, I don't think it just hasn't moved at a pace that we love.
Okay.
But there's still a great deal of work to do. And you're right. I mean, the point here is that this is endemic of it should be endemic of a functioning mixed income model wherein the market rate units are really creating that internal support for the assisted units. And as a consequence, we need to renegotiate our split. So I think we've made the case several times, but we're starting to have to bang on the table.
Well, can you increase the property reserves going forward to?
I understand. So let us take a look at it.
That would reduce the cash flow, right?
Yes,
I also think if we're resyndicating the tax credit side, we would be selling into a new entity, which means we would be refinancing that part of it. And keep in mind that this is an FHA risk share mortgages. And so we're disrupting the whole thing. So we have to figure out how we're leveraging the entire property. So it's really not just a matter of using cash flow to pay for renovations. It's refinancing the whole thing, recapitalizing the whole project, and figuring out, well, how much of the cash flow or how much of the net income is used to generate capital to fund the renovation and so on and so forth, as you all know. So it's all part of what we're figuring out and what it means for the county and HOC, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
We have to work through.
Before I call for the question, may I ask one last question related to our just previous conversation? are we setting ourselves up at the Upton with this challenge of having two different masters and two different budgets and therefore two different finishes?
No.
And
No.
so,
Again, commissioners, I want to emphasize that we, certainly for the last 8 years, if we embark on an effort and it's ground up, the units are the same across the board.
thank you.
Okay, so
Appreciate that.
so no, we're absolutely not doing that at the Upton.
All right.
But just to further clarify, the Upton is HOC, Upton 2 development that is owned by HOC is owned by HOC. We're in control of our 150 units. There isn't any shared ownership between us and anybody else. So when decisions need to be made about renovating that property, it is HOC and its 150 units.
Okay. I move approval of the staff recommendation on the Metropolitan.
I just have one quick comment. I don't mean to belabor the previous MFD discussion, but just wanted to lend my voice to it that, given that there were no firms that, met the qualifications for scoring on that, I don't know if I would just encourage if there's more that we can do to actively encourage firms that would meet the scoring criteria to apply to put it in a bid. So
can I just say, I certainly appreciate that. And the fact that it's now, we're having these conversations, they're in public forum. I think our partners are starting to finally starting to understand that, this isn't just me as an African-American kind of making this up, right? I mean, we actually have, a board who has fiduciary responsibility that, that's focused on this. It is consistent with mission. And so, if you're going to partner with us, you've got to take it as seriously as we are. So I'm appreciative that you're noting it and of all the comments that commissioners made even prior to yours around this today. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a
We
second?
need a second.
Second the motion.
All right, the motion is moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
thank you.
I'm sorry, commissioners. Zach, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and it won't affect your vote, but I just wanted to add a couple of comments on the back of that. And one is that I do think one of the places we've been focusing, but want to continue to focus on is how to attract those qualified firms to these pools. There are 15 pools in this, or 15 firms in this architecture pool. And actually there is one firm that does qualify, but 1 out of 15 is obviously, not sufficient. So first and foremost, we're thinking particularly here and on the general contractor side, it's been a challenge, though we're doing a business with a large number of firms to, we've not been successful as we should in attracting firms that would qualify. So that's number one. We're certainly focusing on that. Number two is that there is one firm in the pool that does qualify. The second issue that we're looking at as well, though, is that the way in which we make that determination of qualification is through Maryland's. Maryland has the Department of Transportation has a certification program, and that's typically how we look for that certificate to say, okay, you qualify as the firm. And so we're going to actually go back and talk to the pool, because I know these firms well. We all do. And there are minority and women principals at these firms. So we're going to go back and actually double check and make sure it's not an issue of certification to some extent with these firms as well, to make sure they're aware of how we certify and they're aware of the program, and to see if in fact some of these firms would qualify. But so there's just a few notes there.
And Zach, not to belabor, Zach and the committee and Stacy, not to belabor this point, but one possibility when we do a new procurement might be to consider, like we do in the single family lenders, having kind of a rolling admission so that, we're continually adding new firms. I don't know, it's something to discuss later on, but just a thought. So that, as firms become aware of HOC and are interested in doing business with us, they can be added. Just a thought.
Good idea. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. The next agenda item is the financing plan, feasibility, and public purpose of Stuart Townhomes in Gaithersburg. So,
And Victoria Dixon will lead this discussion. Victoria, please go ahead. Victoria, are you here?
Rick, could you take the chair for a moment, please? I need to step away.
Sorry, technical.
Okay.
Good morning. You can hear me okay now?
Yes.
So presenting the financing plan for Stuart Townhomes. It's an existing 94-unit apartment community in Rockville, Maryland, owned by MV Affordable Housing Associates Limited Partnership, which is a former Light-Tech entity for which HOC acquired 100% ownership interest. On the next page, you can see previous approvals done by the commission, which includes the use of $700,000 from the OHRF for pre-development expenses, holding up to 16 units vacant to facilitate renovations, selection of Boston Capital as the Light-Tech syndicator, and approval of the final development plan. On PDF page 31, the property has applied for allocation of 4% tax credits, and the proposed financial plan totals $38.2 million in costs to acquire, renovate, and finance the property. As part of the transaction, 100% of the units will be restricted for households with incomes at or below 60% of AMI. One unit will be considered non-revenue to maintain an on-site residence for maintenance personnel. On the next page, closing of the transaction is expected to occur in March, April 2021. The renovation timeline is estimated to be 16 months with consideration of COVID-19 related risk mitigations for conversion to the permanent debt by January 2023. On the next page, you can see a brief breakdown of the unit mix. 19 households will qualify for RAD project-based rental assistance, PBRAs, and approximately 15 units are expected to qualify for low vacancy vouchers, subject to tenant qualifications. The property preserves availability of 2-story townhomes in a residential setting to address housing needs of families with children. It also preserves availability of 3 and 4 bedroom units to serve larger families at affordable rates. Proposed renovations of the property include building envelope and system upgrades to improve efficiencies, common area upgrades with a new playground, comprehensive upgrades of unit interiors, and 5 units will be converted to UFAS accessible. On PDF 36, the property currently benefits from a 100% tax exemption from the state and county for real estate taxes. Such exemption is expected to continue under HOC's ownership. Property management is in process of creating a plan to reduce stabilized operating costs. And based on an estimated all-in interest rate of 4.58%, inclusive of 1.36 cushion for interest rate movements, the property is expected to support a permanent loan of approximately $11.7 million. Excluding the cushion, the property could size up to almost 14.5 million currently. On the next page, staff hereby requests an allocation of up to 16 million in volume cap for the transaction and approval to issue bonds and a first mortgage loan up to the same amount to be insured by FHA risk share mortgage insurance. HOC would assume 25% of that risk. The transaction is expected to generate approximately 8.4 million in tax credit equity and require approximately 16 million of tax exempt financing to meet the 50% test. The commission is requested to approve provision of a seller loan of approximately 11.6 million, which will be contributed as a portion of the property's acquisition price in order to complete economics of the transaction. In addition, the county is being requested to assign the existing $2.1 million HIF loan to the new entity. On the next slide, in structuring the subject transaction, staff considered alternative options for funding of the first mortgage. In comparison to a traditional Fannie Mae mortgage, the subject transaction is more favorable due to higher loan proceeds and interest savings for the transaction. On the next page, PDF 40 and 41, the public purpose of the property scored 90% based on qualitative and quantitative variables in furtherance of HOC's mission, which is in line with previous transactions and supports the allocation of available volume cap. On page 44, commission approvals requested to facilitate this transaction are the following. Approval of the Stuart Town's financing plan as presented, approval of the feasibility of public purpose for Stuart Town, setting aside 100% of units at 60% AMI, an allocation of up to 16 million in volume cap, approval of a bond authorizing resolution for the issuance and delivery of taxes and bonds for up to 16 million under the 1996 indenture, and authorization to issue the financing commitment for the mortgage loan for that amount. Approval to provide credit enhancement via FHA risk share with HOC assuming 25% of the risk. Approval for the MV Affordable Housing Associates Limited Partnership as the seller entity to provide a seller's note. And finally, approval for the borrower to accept these loans. Are there any questions? Will the committee join our recommendation?
I have a question, probably not unexpected. I know that we're converting 5 of the units to UFAS units. And back when we were, the agency was doing renovations and creating UFAS units at Middlebrook Square, the Commission on People with Disabilities had requested that we try to identify the cost differential for making the improvements to convert to UFAS units. And the commission had promised that they would try and gather that data so that the agency knew, but that so other developers and policymakers could understand the costs, because the industry, in my opinion, significantly exaggerates the costs of doing that. And the Commission for People with Disabilities felt that having a government agency like HOC analyzing that data was constructive in educating the industry as a whole. And if it was done, it didn't get reported back, and it may have just gotten lost in the history of change of personnel and so forth. But I think here we have another opportunity to determine, and I'm wondering if it is possible to identify the magnitude, if any, of the additional costs to convert these units to UFAS units. I think it would be a great public benefit to have a government agency identifying these costs rather than going on the general wisdom in the building industry. And I would really love to see us try to do that if we can. And if you've any response, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I know, and Gio's not on because you know, this is Victoria's world here, but are you on, Gio? Do you want to just quickly note like how we identified the UFAS units in this case, and that we were selective in choosing those units, and some of the costs around the adaptation of those particular units? I don't think we know what it would have taken to do the, you know, every single unit, but I think we can certainly talk about the marginal cost here on converting the ones that we did. Gio, do you have any thoughts there?
I do, yeah. So we selected these units. Well, I guess one criterion for selection was that we didn't want them to be all in one building. But besides that,
Thank you.
because of the grading of the property,
Sure.
the ramps that have to be added to make them accessible, in a lot of cases are not possible, would be very, very expensive. So the architect selected the units based on that, what would be the most efficient way to add the ramps to, and then, that was the primary selection criterion. As to the cost, I guess, if we were to select other units, they would have been more expensive because of the ramp requirements. But for the units that were selected, the cost, the additional, the cost of converting those units can definitely be identified from the GC costs, and we can certainly get that data. But I think another thing to keep in mind is that it depends on the units and the property type. This property, when we were discussing the conversion, the accessibility of the second floor internally was not possible. So we had to add a lift to the back to make them accessible. In some cases, it may be possible. So the cost in this case, we can definitely get a number, but it may not be applicable, or we cannot maybe generalize on other units.
I would understand that it's not predictive, but it gives us a piece of information that can be built on. Yes. So that there is some understanding that by careful evaluation of a site, that costs are going to be incremental depending on the topography and all the rest of it. But I think getting some hard numbers could be very useful to other public agencies and policy people. And I would be delighted if the staff could make an effort to try and identify what the difference is on this particular development on the site, the units you chose, understanding that you chose the most economically efficient units to choose. And I think if we can begin to collect this data and use it, we can begin to see a movement toward more inclusive communities. And so I would really appreciate the effort to do that. And I think it would be helpful to let the Commission on People with Disabilities know that we're attempting to gather this data piece by piece as we are undertaking to make our communities more inclusive.
Yes.
Definitely have the information, and we'll pull it from we can come up with a per unit number that we can use for that purpose.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there other questions of the staff?
I have some questions on the volume cap. So it looks like, by this index, this project falls historically towards the high end, which is good to see. But I was also noting, that it looks like we have, we're projecting about $52 million in bond cap available, but you also project need for about 210 million for about 10 different projects. So, while the historical comparison is useful, I'm curious, how you're making determinations about, how to allocate that volume cap amongst the 10 competing projects there, and whether I don't know if you can even do it yet, but like whether you need to index it against those projects to see what's going to score highest.
I mean, I'd say right now the decisions we're making are primarily just around readiness and timing.
Okay.
So Stuart Town is going forward more so because it's essentially ready to go. We're also trying to fit, we're obviously trying to fit as many within the number that we know we have access to. Beyond that, we're certainly working on things strategies and other things to try to improve the volume cap situation. In some cases, as you know, with West Side at Shady Grove, we've come up with alternatives to the volume cap issue. But ultimately, it could come to that sort of a determination for the commission if it ultimately has to decide between one project or another. And certainly, you could use public purpose to determine that. You could use other things. It could be the lack of an alternative, for instance. Property like Stuart Town would struggle with an alternative, whereas West Side Shady Grove obviously was able to manage that, and that's primarily because of the mixed income nature of the property.
Yeah, no, and that was a little bit of my question, whether this was just a question of timing. And it sounds like it primarily is, but then I guess the question becomes if you've, how you're making your decisions, if you've got competing projects that are going to, need it, how you're deciding where to allocate, a scarce resource.
But that, I would add that that was sort of the point of that bond cap matrix, where you have competing projects. How do you decide?
Well, but the matrix, at least as it's being presented to us, is only comparing it historically rather than against,
correct,
its current competition.
Mm-hmm. And so for the list of projects that we must finance, it now might be an appropriate time to just go through the list, and if you exclude the ones that are ready to go, and the ones that we must finance, and then look at all the others. Now might be the time to run it through the matrix and decide, well, which ones qualify, and rank them. And as Zach said, there are alternate ways of funding some of them, and we do go through the exercise each year and meet with the folks at CDA and discuss additional needs and reach some kind of an agreement with them, quote unquote, for additional volume cap. And so we will do that. We will have that meeting with the list of projects that we anticipate funding in 2021. And we'll have a better sense of whether there is additional volume cap available to the commission, and make our plans based on that and other factors. So we can certainly go through that process for sure, because there's enough data for us to be able to do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm not suggesting not to use it for this project, but I think giving the commission a sense of how these other projects rank against each other, and if it comes to that point where we have to make those kinds of allocation decisions, would be helpful.
But Commissioner, while the questions are obviously valid, right? But the issue here is not a shortage of volume cap across the state. The issue is a shortage of volume cap
for us
with regard to right. And so the fact of the matter is, I don't think we ought to be prioritizing one affordable housing effort over another one, given that there is significant resource available that is going unused for multifamily housing, right? And so the policy implication to me is how we are working with legislative and executive branch at the state level to ensure that we have sufficient volume cap to build out and preserve, extend the life of this portfolio.
Well, I certainly support that. I think that obviously is the ideal solution, and I guess I don't know. Are you how you feel about our chances of getting the full amount of volume cap that we need?
I think this is an opportunity for us to be talking about it and vying for it actively, right? How do I feel? By and large, we HOC staff have acted within the guidelines provided us. We have been more than communicative about volume cap need for a series of years now. We had a handshake with the state that one, we would report out what we thought our need was on active transactions on pipeline. We would report our progress toward the actual use of potential use of volume cap, and that they would support our efforts at the appropriate time. I think that there was a little disbelief, although I don't know why, given this team, that we would in fact meet the hurdles as we march toward readiness and use of allocation and use of volume cap. I'll say that I think that there's a little bit of prickliness about an agency that competes in the marketplace, particularly on single family and in other areas of bond issuance, that is sort of a state. It's a state mandated organization, but is a competitor within Montgomery County. I think that winds up creating a little bit of tension. It doesn't have to. It shouldn't. I think if we had bond issuing agencies in every single county, it still wouldn't be enough to deal with our affordable housing challenges. And so, I think we're marching toward a set of tactics, but in the meantime, we're abiding by our agreement with the State Department of Housing and Community Development to give notice and information about the portfolio as we march toward the need for volume cap assignment for every project.
Stacy, am I not correct that the state would like to be they are an intermediary as far as allocation, but that it comes with a cost to the funds available to us by channeling excess unused volume cap? Is that accurate or not? Or partially accurate?
So each jurisdiction gets an allocation of volume cap. If that volume cap goes unused, then typically it has come back to the state. And the state has the ability in two departments, initially Commerce, but also in DHCD, Housing and Community Development, to assign that volume cap to an issuing agency like ours, which is our contention, right? A couple contentions. One, yes, there is volume cap available for housing, and there's volume cap available for economic development. Affordable housing, in the way that we are executing it, satisfies both from our vantage point. So we want all the volume cap they can give us. Two, if there's excess volume cap and other jurisdictions are not using theirs, and yet you have an agency in any county, in any jurisdiction that is outperforming others and therefore exceeds the need, its typical need, then that agency ought to have access to the volume cap available for use it, and stabilize our housings, get closer to our housings, for our counties and our state's affordable housing need. And I don't think that's out of line. I mean, it's a resource. We have access to it. We have a gatekeeper now who is denying us access to it. It's inappropriate to do so. And this is more than a policy consideration. This goes to the very heart of how community works, how families and individuals get stabilized, and ultimately how jurisdictions are able to grow or maintain their tax bases.
And it's been made political. I mean, another jurisdiction that isn't using their cap can't voluntarily assign it to us. It has to go back to the state, right?
As it stands right now, yes.
That's what we need to overcome.
We as a state need to overcome that, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Madam Chair, excuse me for a point of privilege. I've got to leave this call at 11:45. So if there are other matters you need for me as a committee member to consider, I would ask you to advance the agenda, please.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the staff recommendation on Stuart Town for moving forward to the full commission?
So moved.
Seconded.
It's moved and seconded. Staff, we thank you for your recommendations, and it's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Let's move on to phase 2 at Shady Grove.
Okay, and this last item will be discussed by Marcus Urban, Housing Acquisition Manager in the Real Estate Development Group. Marcus, please go ahead.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Marcus Urban, Housing Acquisition Manager in the Real Estate Development Department. Here to obtain Development Finance Committee's recommendation to authorize the Executive Director to enter into a guaranteed maximum price contract with Bizzuto Construction in an amount not to exceed $76.4 million. Next slide, please. This is I want to say probably the fourth action, or the third at least, for the month of December. But recall just at our December commission meeting, we approved actions such as approval of the final development plan, also the plan of finance, feasibility, public purpose, bond authorizing resolution, and other related actions. Action for today is the final as we advance towards closing at the end of January 2021 for the general contractor agreement. Next slide, please. Just a quick development overview. Once again, 268 units, considerable amount of amenity space, which will cater to the population in the development, structured parking, and estimated total project cost of roughly $119 million, including HOC financing fees, Davis-Bacon wage premiums, and also the service center build out. Our construction milestone schedule hasn't changed. We have a more detailed scheduled later in the presentation, but looking at a February 21 start, 24-month construction period, with first delivery of units coming online sometime in November of 22 and completion sometime in January of 23. Next slide. Development overview. We've gone through this extensively. Essentially a story past for the development over the last 10 years involving EYA and building out this community, inclusive of multifamily townhomes and condominiums. And Westside Shady Grove subject development represents the second multifamily effort in that community. Next slide. Interior renderings are unchanged, but this just speaks to the aesthetic within the building and the leasing and lobby areas and public community spaces. Next slide. Development team, we've gone through this as well, but we're joined by two high-profile multifamily market rate developers, inclusive of EYA as our development partner. Bizzuto Development is also co-developer, and Bizzuto Construction as the general contractor, and architecture being led by KTGY Architecture and Planning. All right. For the heart of the matter, the general contractor construction costs, carrying about $76.4 million, inclusive of recommended value engineering amounts. This also just represents the market shift in the financial sector, and then also within subsectors, including the lumber market, utilities, finishes, and so forth. We are carrying a hard cost contingency of about 3%. And for the MBE discussion, we have met a 20% participation. Within that includes various trades, including painting, site work, concrete work, and even the subcontractor that'll be completing the garage has a WBE firm that's an erector. So the team has been very aggressive and making sure that various elements of the building were meeting the minority participation. But I've talked about the building in terms of phases, but just to kind of illustrate how the building will be constructed, there's essentially two phases, a phase A and B. Phase A is inclusive of the 7-story component that wraps the parking garage. So we have construction commencement in February. A lot of activity that you'll see between springtime into fall of 21 would consist of garage and precast work. Phase B, the 5-story component, which contains a lot of the amenities, courtyard areas in the center, the HOC service center, would commence around the summertime mark. So we'll see some framing activities in late spring into fall, and rounding out into June of 21 through January of 23, additional framing, residential units, and then substantial completion for the building. And on to the right is a key of all the various uses. So residential 268 units, leasing on the first floor of the building, the retail component, the HOC service center on the second floor, and the garage. And lastly, just to recap the issues for consideration, will the Development and Finance Committee join staff's recommendation to the Commission that the Commission authorize the Executive Director to execute a guaranteed maximum price contract with Bozzuto Construction Company in an amount not to exceed $76.4 million. At this time, I'll take any questions you may have.
Are there questions of the staff?
I have no questions.
I have just a request, in presenting the construction costs there, be useful for some of us who aren't as familiar to have a key to some of the square footage terms, TGSF, Res, GSF, and RSF.
Yes. Sure.
Yeah. And then, given that we do those, I think it is helpful to break it down, to that level. Are there market comparisons available that would allow us to see how this cost compares to other projects?
Yes, we can provide that, but I'll say broadly, if we were to compare this to the closest comparable being the Daily across the street, this project does have a considerable more amount of retail. So there are some costs there. Also, the amenities and finishes are a grade above the Daily project. So we do have additional retail, and then also within the residential packages, those costs have grown. So there's an exercise we can provide to show a sort of a cost to date if we were to compare it. And then broadly across Bozzuto's portfolio, they've shared other market rate properties. If you were to remove the Davis-Bacon component, some cost parity there, but across the board, the lumber index and also costs for finishes and materials have increased. So,
okay, no, thank you. And then again, sort of new to me, the recommended value engineering. Am I understanding that correctly? That that's sort of building into the budget expected savings? Correct.
So the team goes through extensive rounds of essentially looking at materials that are spec'd and without sacrificing quality, making substitutions for different manufacturers while still delivering the product that we presented.
Okay. I guess I'm more used to seeing, sort of contingencies built in or some cushion built in rather than expected savings. So is there any concern about not being able to realize those savings?
No, we're carrying a healthy contingency as well as owner contingencies, and positive that we can even try to get this the recommended value engineering number down a little bit further. So between at the ownership level and partners, we're pushing the general contractor to realize those savings. So we've had pretty extensive meetings over the last 2 weeks to realize that. We feel we're getting there.
Okay, great. Thank you. No additional questions for me.
Marcus, you raised one point. Are we able to document the Davis-Bacon costs?
Yes, we can.
I mean, because I think that that's something that we need to do on as many projects as we can, because I remember when I was in the county, the issue came up and trying to find out that cost and the differential between Davis-Bacon and non-Davis-Bacon projects was difficult at most. So being able to identify it is useful. I'm not sure that obviously it's going to affect anything other than just being able to say, because of Davis-Bacon, this project is costing us X extra dollars. And people need to understand that.
Yeah, so there's, as we've been working through this project, we've been developing ways in which we can use this as a template for ones going forward, since this is occurring in real time. So we'll be able to provide that level of detail.
Good. I would move approval of the staff recommendation.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Before I call for the question, I'd like to ask Marcus if we can also identify the additional costs, if any, of the UFAS units in the development.
Okay, we'll do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion to authorize the executive director to move forward to execute a guaranteed maximum price with Bozzuto, indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, staff. This morning's agenda represents an awful lot of work, and we appreciate you all, and we hope that you have a wonderful and safe holiday. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you all.
Happy holidays.